Hello, everybody, and we are back for episode 59 of Untold Evidence. Today, our journey starts the 28th of November 1953 at 3 a.m. in New York City. A 43-year-old Army biochemist named Frank Olson falls from the 13th floor window of the Staple Hotel, opposite Penn Station. The official report records the death as suicide during a severe psychotic episode. What the official report does not record is what Olson's family will not learn for 22 years, is that 9 days earlier, a Central Intelligence Agency retreat at Deep Creek Lake in western Maryland, Olson's after-dinner drink had been spiked with lysergic acid diethylamide by a CIA chemist named Sidney Gottlieb as part of a program codenamed MKUltra. Now, this is again another incredibly interesting time in history with mystery, conspiracy, lies, truth. We don't know what's going on, but this is one of, again, my most favorite and interested parts of Untold Evidence is what the hell is MKUltra? Why did it stop? And could it possibly be still going on? In 1994, when the Olson family obtained a second autopsy, the forensic team found injuries on Frank Olson's body that occurred before he hit the ground. The CIA program that drugged American citizens without their consent for 2 decades, killed at least one of them, destroyed its own records to avoid persecution, and was only discovered because a financial clerk had filed paperwork in the wrong cabinet. Wow! Here we go. Untold Evidence, episode 59. On April the 13th, 1953, Allen Dulles, director of the CIA, formally authorised Project MKUltra. Its stated rationale was the early Cold War conviction fueled by reports of American POWs in Korea giving false confessions that the Soviet Union, China and North Korea had developed effective mind control techniques. The CIA therefore wanted to know if such techniques existed, if they were real, and whether they could be replicated, and also could they be replicated using both offensive and defensive tactics. Now, the man in charge of the program was Sidney Gottlieb, a Bronx-born chemist with a doctorate from Caltech, and by 1953, the CIA's Chief of Technical Service Staff. He would be given, in the words of the declassified internal CIA document, almost unlimited funds and effectively zero independent oversight. I've never heard that sentence used with MKUltra. Doesn't surprise me, but that's a big statement. Almost unlimited funds and effectively zero independent oversight. So between 1953 and 1964, the program's main operational period, MKUltra, ran 149 separate subprojects, funded through the CIA's front organization, executed at over 80 institutional universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. The list included Stanford University, Columbia University, McGill University in Montreal, the Allan Memorial Institute, the Lexington Federal Penitentiary, and the Vacaville State Prison in California. The drugs tested include LSD, MDMA, mescaline, psilocybin, metamorphine, heroin, barbiturates, and the powerful military-graded incapacitant codenamed BZ. In the early 1950s, Gottlieb arranged for the CIA to purchase the entire global supply of LSD from the Sandoz Pharmaceutical Laboratories in Switzerland. Not suspicious at all. The contract was reportedly worth $240,000 at the time, equivalent to around $4 million today. Subjects included, by the CIA's own later admission, both willing volunteers and unwitting American citizens, mental patients, prisoners, sex workers, drug addicts, soldiers, members of the public approached through false front recruitment operations. One subproject, Operation Midnight Climax, set up a CIA-funded safe house in San Francisco and New York, hired prostitutes, lured ordinary men into the safe house, spiked their drinks with LSD, and filmed and observed their reactions through a two-way mirror. Another subproject, Subproject 68, funded the Scottish-born psychiatrist Dr. Ewen Cameron at the Allan Memorial Institute in Montreal. Cameron subjected dozens of patients who had presented with conditions as mild as postpartum depression to drug-induced comas, massive electric shocks, and weeks of recorded message playback he called psychic driving. Many of the patients suffered permanent neurological damage. In 1974, in the wake of the Watergate scandal and growing political exposure to its domestic operations, the CIA prepared to bury MKUltra. Director at the time, Richard Helms, Gottlieb's longtime patron, issued an order to destroy the program's records. By the time the destruction was complete, the CIA's own internal inspector general would later state that the bulk of the operational documentation, including subject names, dosing records, and outcomes, was gone. The agency's own 1977 testimony to Congress describes the record as, quote, irretrievably destroyed. Two things saved what little survived. First, a 1963 Inspector General's report on MKUltra, prepared a decade before by Helms' destruction's order, and had been retained in classified archives. It survived, and it contained an outline-level description of the program. Second, and almost by accident, a clerk in the CIA's budget and fiscal section had in 1970 sent a set of MKUltra-related financial records to the agency's retired records center outside of Washington. That filing was a procedural anomaly. It had been done by mistake. As a result, when Helms ordered the records destroyed in 1973, those particular financial folders were not in the active retention system. They were missed. And in 1977, the FOIA-driven employee at the Record Center found those folders, approximately 20,000 pages of MKUltra material, heavily financial, but containing many subproject identifiers and institutional names, entered the public record. The first major exposure came in 1975, however, before the financial cache was found. The Church Committee, the Senate Select Committee, chaired by Idaho Democrat Frank Church, established to investigate intelligence community abuses, and the Rockefeller Commission, established by President Ford, both produced public reports. Frank Olson's family, who had been told for 22 years that their husband and father had jumped from a hotel window during a depressive episode, learned for the first time what had actually happened. Sidney Gottlieb was granted limited immunity in exchange for his testimony. What a shock, he was never criminally charged. President Ford invited the Olson family to the White House and apologized. Congress passed a private bill awarding the family $750,000 in compensation. Now we have the counter-narrative, and we always want to include one. The strongest defense of MKUltra rests on the genuine intelligence environment of the early 1950s. The CIA had real reason to believe, based on the POW behavior in Korea captivity, on Soviet defector testimony, and on contemporaneous Chinese statements about thought reform, that the adversary services were experimenting with chemical and psychological coercion. Researching whether such methods could be replicated, contained, or defended against was a defensible function of an intelligence service. The line between defensible research and what MKUltra became was what crossed clearly and early. The Truman-era oversight rules already prohibited human experimentation on unwitting subjects. The Nuremberg Code, formulated in 1947 by American jurists in response to Nazi medical crimes, had explicitly required informed consent for any human research. Gottlieb's program operated as if neither rule existed. Some defenders argue that the program's actual scientific output was minimal. The LSD was deemed too unpredictable for operational use by 1960, and that MKUltra wasted the lives without producing usable intelligent techniques. The argument is not a defense of the program, it is a description of why the harm, in the end, was gratuitous. Now, I always think the question needs to be asked here as the depth of the actual research it seems completely illogical to me, like with a lot of things in disclosure, that this can ever truly fully come out. I assume we'd have to wait for the death of every single person involved, as we see time and time again. Nobody is ever charged with a crime, barely even tried for a crime. But what is interesting, at least to me, is what could be happening in this day and age. We live in a day of AI where things move at an unprecedentedly quick rate. Yet, if looking back over the 1940s, 50s and 60s taught me or you anything, the scientists there were not far behind. They were, at least to me, light years ahead of where I thought they were going to be, or even could be. If I add that in, their experience and technique, to today's AI world, to me it is frightening what could be happening using public funds under commissioned government direction. So MKUltra ran for 2 decades. It tested powerful drugs on Americans without their consent. It also funded a Canadian psychiatrist whose treatment left dozens of patients permanently damaged. It killed Frank Olson. It destroyed its own records before they could be examined. And the man who ran it, Sidney Gottlieb, retired with a pension and lived another 26 years before dying peacefully at home in 1999. Peacefully at home in 1999. No one was ever criminally prosecuted for MKUltra. Another potentially delicate episode, but one that again blows my mind in that A, it could be done at that stage of humanity, B, it was hidden for so long, and C, what is going on now. If this episode was useful to you, please hit a like and the subscribe button. As ever, if we've misidentified, misinformed or misunderstood any of this story, please correct us. We will have a chat in the comment section and let's get to the truth together. Thank you so much for joining us. I will see you in the next episode.